Have you ever noticed how spring is like a big reset button? Like one minute it's all cozy winter vibes and then suddenly everything changes. It's like everyone's waking up and things can get, well, a little interesting. And that's the world we're diving into today. We're going to meet a young man named Manjiro, and he's dealing with a pretty classic bully problem. But there's a twist. Manjiro's a Japanese boy living in 19th century America, so he's also trying to find his place in a culture that's totally different from his own. We've got these excerpts from a fictional story about Manjiro, and they come with some analysis too, so we can really dig into what's going on. Okay, so picture this. It's a small American town just coming out of winter. Things are peaceful, and it's actually a bit of a break for Manjiro from this bully. But then spring arrives, and so does the trouble. This time, it's in the form of a kid named Tom. And right away, you get the feeling that this isn't just a simple schoolyard thing. It feels like there's this deeper conflict going on, and it makes you think about how Manjiro's Japanese heritage plays into all of this.
Yeah, you're totally picking up on what the author's doing here. That cultural context is super important to understand the whole story. It's not just about a bully and the kid he's picking on. It's like these two totally different sets of social rules are kind of smashing into each other. Like Manjiro's upbringing in Japan probably gave him a different idea of what conflict is, and how you show respect and how you're supposed to handle situations like this.
And then on top of that, Manjiro's friends, Terry and Job, they try to help, but their advice is kind of a perfect example of how good intentions can totally miss the mark. I mean, the suggestions are kind of funny to us, but I bet they seemed totally normal to them. Like Terry, he's all for just throwing down and having a fist fight. And then Job, I think he's trying to be all culturally sensitive or something because he actually suggests a sword fight as if that would solve anything.
Right. It just shows how you can try to help, but if you don't get where someone's coming from culturally, your advice can be totally off. It's kind of funny, but it highlights how different those cultural understandings can be.
So we've got Manjiro's friends trying to help, but their advice is, well, a little off. Manjiro decides to go hang out in the barn with his horse, Duffy.
And this is where the story gets really interesting.
Yeah, it's like we're moving from this almost comical attempt to solve the problem to something much deeper.
Exactly. Like the author's using this transition to the barn to show us more of Manjiro's inner world.
Yeah, and it even mentions how the smell of hay makes Manjiro think of Japan. It takes him back to this temple from his childhood.
It's such a powerful image, right?
Yeah, you get this real sense of how homesick he is.
And using those sensory details, like the smell of the barn, it's like the author's turning it into this kind of sanctuary for Manjiro. It becomes this place where he can reconnect with a part of himself that feels lost.
And that feeling of longing for a place where you belong, I mean, everyone's felt that at some point, right?
Oh, absolutely. It's universal.
Yeah.
And it's in that quiet space with Duffy that we start to see how much Manjiro's really struggling.
And it's not just about being afraid of a fight, is it?
No, it goes way beyond that.
It's like he wants to stand up for himself, but he also doesn't want to cause more trouble.
Right, it's like this inner conflict. And it'd be easy to just see that as him being scared. But there's so much more to it than that.
Like he's trying to figure out how to fit into this new culture, but he also doesn't want to lose himself.
Exactly. It's like he's trying to balance these two different worlds.
And the author actually gives us this line where Manjiro talks about being afraid of being thrown out of school, of bringing shame to his family.
Oh, I remember that line.
It just gets to the heart of how much pressure he's under.
Totally.
It's not just about him, it's about his whole family, his culture.
And that fear of not wanting to disappoint his family, that really speaks to his cultural values. It shows how different cultures view the same situation. What might seem like a small thing to his American classmates is huge for Manjiro.
It's like he's caught between these two worlds and he's trying to figure out how to make them fit together.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's not easy.
And then just when you think the story's going to tell us how he figures it out, it ends.
Right. It's like,
Yeah.
what happens next?
Total cliffhanger.
And the author does it on purpose.
Oh, yeah.
It's like this literary trick to keep you hooked.
But it also makes you think, doesn't it?
It does. It makes you wonder what you would do if you were Manjiro,
Yeah, like how do you stay true to yourself when you're trying so hard to fit in?
especially in a place that's so different from everything you know.
It's like that feeling stays with you even after you finish the story.
Totally. And that's how you know it's a good story.
Yeah, it makes you think about how these things happen in real life too, not just in books.
Exactly. People have been trying to figure out how to fit in for, forever.
It's a universal thing.
It is. And that's the cool thing about stories. They can show us these really deep truths about what it means to be human.
Right. Even if we're not a Japanese boy in 19th century America, we can still relate to that feeling of being stuck between two worlds.
Absolutely. And that's why this deep dive has been so interesting, right?
Yeah, we started with this story about a kid being bullied.
And we ended up talking about cultural
Not to
differences
family.
and trying to figure out who you are.
It's a lot to think about.
It is, but it's good stuff to think about.
So if anything we talked about today resonated with you, I'd really encourage you to check out the full story of Manjiro. It's called Name of Story, and you can find it where to find story. It's a great read, and I think it'll give you even more to think about. Because like we were saying, these challenges, they're not always about someone else trying to make things hard for you. Sometimes the biggest challenges are the ones we have to face within ourselves, and that's something we all deal with no matter who we are or where we come from.